Man, this game was doomed from the start.
Now, why exactly do I say this? Well, it's because this is the first game to come out after Rare was acquired by Microsoft, and this was essentially the final nail in the coffin or the moment of realization for all Rare fans that it was over. Rare was no longer able to make games for Nintendo consoles. Well, home consoles, they were still able to make Game Boy games. But regardless, this essentially meant it was over for series like Donkey Kong and Banjo-Kazooie never getting a third game. And thus, all the anger and frustration that stemmed from these events found itself directing itself right at this game. This was the perfect punching bag for those fans to vent their anger and frustration out on. And this is something I would argue would have happened regardless of the quality of the game. Which, having said that, I do believe that this not being one of their better games doesn't help the situation. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. So let's now properly start this review off with this game's story. And the story of this game finds our hero Cooper and his girlfriend being lost within a forest. And unfortunately there's a storm coming, so they have no choice but to hide out in this old mansion that they found. And bad news for them, as this mansion is not abandoned. It is instead filled to the brim with many ghouls and monsters looking to do harm. And the entire place is run by the devilish Baron von Ghoul, who traps whoever wanders in within the mansion, with Cooper's girlfriend being his next victim. Now he must traverse through the house so he can confront the Baron, and defeat any ghoulies that get in his way. A task that luckily the people who work in the house are willing to help him out with, by pointing you on the right direction towards completing your quest, as well as providing very useful bonus items and weapons. But anyway, that covers the story. Now on to the gameplay. And well, the way this game is played is less like your usual 3D action-adventure game. Or hell, it's not even like an open-world game where you get to explore the mansion at your own pace. Instead, the best way I could describe this game is that it's a modern interpretation of an arcade game, because the gameplay is like bare-bones simple, with your main objective of the game going through every single room one at a time and trying to defeat all the enemies within it. And this is done by just mainly beating the crap out of them. And I mean, this is more or less kind of it. I mean, there's like nothing extra like complex combos or something like that. I mean, you literally use the right stick to attack, of all things, by just pointing it at an enemy and then he just does a whole bunch of punches. But I should probably stop undercutting it here, since obviously it's not just that simple. Since there are like weapons that you could pick up and use against the enemies, whether it be like actually hitting them with it or throwing stuff, or power-ups that you could find that like freeze the enemies or give you more health. And there's even parts in the game where you actually aren't doing combat, like in these cool sequences where you're in first person, like slowly walking through a room, and then you end up getting jump scared and need to do a quick time event and press a whole bunch of buttons real quick, so that's at least something. But going back to the main combat, there are two things that this game does in order to shake up the combat every time you go into a different room. The first of which being is that at some point in the game, Baron von Ghoul starts screwing with your health. And every time you enter a new room, it just gets randomized. So it can end up being pretty high or pretty low. The second thing, and more important one, is that every single time you go into a new room, you have a new set of challenges that you must do. You know, ranging from something as simple as don't use weapons or don't destroy any, like, furniture, to the more complex stuff like don't defeat a certain type of enemy or don't defeat the same type of enemy twice, or you can only defeat these enemies with a certain amount of hits. And trust me, you don't want to fail any of these, because if you fail just one of these challenges within a room, it spawns in the Grim Reaper. And if he touches you, you're dead. And then you gotta restart the whole room over again. Although I will say that it's pretty cool that he could actually kill enemies as well, so it actually might be beneficial sometimes to get him in there. But anyway, that more or less covers the gameplay. And well, from what I said, and as you could see in the gameplay, this is kind of why this game is not considered that very good. Because it really is just you doing the same exact thing in like every single room, with the most amount of depth that you get is the challenges, and even those kind of run thin. Although I will concede that this isn't the longest of games, since it only really takes 3 to 4 hours to beat it. But even then, you'd still probably be tired of it. I mean, the main fatal flaw of this game is just the simple fact that it's way too simple for the modern console that it was released for. Instead, it being more appropriate if it was an actual arcade game. And well, with the combination of the under-par nature of this game and all those angry Rare fans I talked about earlier, led to this game being more or less lambasted. So much to the point that Rare themselves don't even seem to like this game and see it as nothing more than a failure. Oh, and I just remembered one last knock against this game. That being that people said that this game is essentially just a ripoff of Luigi's Mansion. Which I mean, I kinda get where they're coming from, with this game being all about fighting off supernatural creatures in a mansion. And well, with this game releasing 2 years after Luigi's Mansion, I could easily see a certain scenario of Rare seeing how successful the game was and trying to recreate it for themselves. But in all honesty, I'm pretty sure this is one of those things that like never got confirmed or whatever, or it's just a simple coincidence. But anyway, that finishes all the major stuff I wanted to cover with this game. So now we'll just finish this up by going over the last 3 minor things I could think of. The first of which being this game's graphics, which I mean are pretty good. They're like classic, rare, cartoony graphics. And all the monsters are designed well with their like over-exaggerated features and over-the-top expression and movements. And the same with the human characters, with them purposely being made into an odd bunch. And I don't know if this counts for graphics, but I also like how this game is presented through like a storybook, with every time you go into a new room, the page of the book turns or the cutscenes are being played within the book. But regardless, it is just a really neat presentation. Alright, the next thing I want to knock out is the music. And well, the music is delightfully playful, with I guess a bit of horror elements mixed in because this is still supposed to be somewhat of a scary game, which I guess is somewhat achieved with the music that plays when you're not in combat, with it being quite atmospheric to the part of the house that you're in. But again, that's not very often, and the music you're usually listening to is very like active and energetic since you're fighting off enemies to it. And I will also note that I like how this game has different themes for different types of enemies. Like you'll have a different piece of music if you're going up against skeletons or imps or zombies or even zombie pirates. So that's just a neat little piece of variation when it comes to the types of music you'll hear. Alright, that finishes up the music. Now onto the last thing, which I'm really only throwing in here so I could say I covered the whole game more or less. And that is the bonus mini-games that this game has. And these are unlocked by collecting a certain amount of rare books throughout the game, which are like usually hidden within like a piece of furniture you have to break. And there's 100 of them to collect, with every 5 that you get getting a new challenge, which comes out to 20 challenges. And well, if I'm being completely honest, there's really nothing to say with these things, since they're kinda just more of the same, with you needing to beat a certain amount of enemies within a certain time limit or trying to survive for a certain amount of time. I mean, I guess overall it's good that there's extra content in this game, it just sucks that it's nothing new. Outside of the secret challenge that you need to unlock, and then it's like the entire game but you only have 10 health throughout the entire thing, which is a pretty cool challenge. I just doubt anyone's gonna make it that far to unlock it. But anyway, that covers the minor topics as well as the game as a whole. And well, my final conclusion with this game is that although it's nowhere near Rare's best game, this is also nowhere near Rare's worst game. It's just a game that was set up to fail due to the circumstances surrounding it that was completely out of its hands.
So yeah, this was just the wrong game at the wrong time.
So in the credits for this game, there are certain parts where it'll show like a name or a company and it'll show like a character from the game on top of it. And well, I bring this up because there's just something really funny that Rare did here. That being when you get to the Microsoft credit, it shows Baron von Ghoul's head. And it's definitely like that, you know, they did this on purpose, putting the villain above the company that bought them out.